Good morning. It's Friday, December the 18th, and this is The Drill. Thank you. The prayer of the day. Lord Jesus, you came to save us from sin and the power of death. May I always rejoice in your salvation and trust in your divine plan for my life. Amen. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. Today, listen to your conscience. Culture is the foundation of society. Basic philosophical principles. Do not confuse republicanism with conservatism. Know who your enemy is. Beware of moderates. Foundation building. The collapse of parenting. And where do we stand? All that when I come back. Thank you very much. The most important thing that Ayn Rand taught me was to listen to myself. When I take seriously that little voice inside my head that tells me when something is wrong, I am rewarded. I am rewarded with ever-increasing confidence. Whenever I am reading something or watching television or listening to the radio and I begin to feel uncomfortable, I make note of what exactly is bothering me and think about it. If at first I am frustrated, I am not put off. I remain persistent, and I eventually succeed. The key to confident behavior is to be able to trust yourself. Culture is the foundation of society. Everything else is built on top of it. Culture informs politics. The left is trying to subvert our American Western culture. They're using Oriental cultures to do that. The left considers Oriental cultures as superior because Oriental cultures are supposed to be more change-oriented. Socialism is also change-oriented. Capitalism is a natural outgrowth of Western culture, and socialism is a natural outgrowth of Oriental cultures. When I come back, philosophical principles and republicanism versus conservatism. Thank you. Welcome back. In order to defeat the lefty, you must study basic philosophical principles. For instance, the question, if a tree in a forest falls and no one is around to hear it, did it make a noise? Is a serious question about reality. Is knowledge innate or acquired? Are we born with all the knowledge that we're going to have, or are we born a blank slate and learn as we go along? Are rights and wrongs universal? Do they apply to everybody, everywhere, at all times? What is justice? Do we have free will, or are we determined by powers beyond our control? What is it that we find beautiful or ugly? Does beauty even exist in reality, or is it merely a tool used to manipulate and oppress others? Do not confuse conservatism with republicanism. The former is a worldview and the latter is a political theory. You're not conservative based on the way that you vote. You are Republican based on the way that you vote. The first thing that you have to do is understand your worldview. Are you realistic or idealistic? Do you make the presumption for the status quo and change only when the need for change is obvious? Or do you presume change? Are you monotheistic, atheistic, or polytheistic? Once you've answered those questions, you can know whether or not you are a conservative or non-conservative. By the way, you have to choose. There's no middle ground. There are no moderates, and more importantly, there is no cafeteria. You cannot be a little socialist and a little conservative. You're one or the other. Any valid political philosophical theory must be all-encompassing for obvious reasons. It must prepare you to deal with any situation or contingency, and the only way to do that is to have political ideas that match your world view. Is the world an inherently bad place where failure is to be expected? The left. Or is the world a place where we can and do know things and therefore reasonably expect success? The right. When I come back, know who your enemy is and know that there are no moderates. Thank you. You have to know who your enemy is. The left doesn't go around wearing uniforms. So you identify your enemy by hallmarks. The following are the hallmarks of your enemies: socialism, psychologism, subjectivism, pragmatism, activism, materialism, skepticism, and determinism. Psychologism means using psychology as one's frame of reference. Subjectivism means rejecting reality and replacing it with opinion and popularity. Pragmatism says that the ends justify the means. Activism is about acting first and thinking later. Materialism is the denial of the reality of concepts and abstractions. Skepticism denies certainty of knowledge, and determinism is the denial of free will. You have to know that there are no moderates. What is the moderate position, for instance, on abortion? There is no such thing. You have to know that socialism and conservatism are contradictory, repugnant, and not contrary, black and white, meaning that there is no compromise between socialism and capitalism. Contrary means that two political theories have something basic in common. For instance, socialism and libertarianism are contrary and not contradictory because they have the same basic root in common, namely idealism. Both want an ideal society, but differ in terms of what they consider to be an ideal society. Contradictory means that they have nothing in common. Socialism is idealistic, and conservatism is realistic. Beware of foundation building. The left may make statements or ask questions that you are tempted to agree with because they're innocuous, but they will be used as the basis for future demands that trap you. For instance, do Black Lives Matter? Yes. Then reparations. Do Black Lives Matter? Of course. Then single-payer health care. Do Black Lives Matter? Certainly. Then socialism. All of the political mistakes in this country were made by building on a faulty foundation. Title IX, abortion, the pill are all built on the faulty foundation that men are inherently and irredeemably oppressive. The legalization of the recreational use of marijuana is based on the foundation that marijuana and alcohol are both drugs. The Endangered Species Act is based on the faulty foundation that nothing can be known with certainty, skepticism. When I come back, who is the true conservative? Thank you. Who is the true conservative? First and foremost, he is realistic. Well, actually, first and foremost, he is God-fearing. Secondly, he's realistic. The true conservative is the man who follows his plan. He's appropriate. He is the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He's the person that subordinates politics to reality. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He acts like an adult. He's patriotic and uses common sense. He is judgmental and moralizes. He refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He's consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He's a normal American, and he's better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that being a true conservative is best, or you're wasting your time. Additional examples of what it means to be a true conservative can be heard by listening to John Cobelt and Ken Champeau on The John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640 Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. My podcast is short, approximately 5 to 20 minutes long, because shorter podcasts are easier to download and listen to. The biggest socio-political influences in my life are Jesus Christ, my parents, my teachers, Hugh Hewitt, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Ayn Rand, and Dr. Mortimer Adler. My podcast is made available through Spreaker and can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, Google, YouTube, CastBox, and others. I can be reached at thedrill12@gmail.com. And now, the collapse of parenting. The issue isn't always that parents are unwilling to assert their authority. Sometimes they believe that they are helping their children by stepping back and letting their kids decide. Here's an example of what not to do. In other words, an example of how many American parents now behave. Megan and Jim, both 40-something parents, had planned a 4-day ski vacation between Christmas and New Year's. Their 12-year-old daughter, Courtney, politely declined to join them. "You know I'm not crazy about skiing," she said. "I'll just stay at Arden's house for those 4 days." Her parents said it's okay. They have a spare guest room and everything. So her parents went on the ski vacation by themselves, and Courtney spent 4 days at the home of her best friend. I didn't mind. In fact, I was pleased that Courtney could be so independent, Megan told me. But Megan is mistaken. Courtney isn't independent. No 12-year-old truly is. Instead, Courtney has transferred her natural dependence from her parents, where it should be, to her same-age peers, where it shouldn't be. Courtney's top priorities now lie in pleasing her friends, being liked by her friends, being accepted by same-age peers. Her parents have become an afterthought, a means to other ends. You can see how good parents who love their kids can fall into this trap. You love your child. It's natural to want to please someone you love. If your daughter doesn't want to join you and your spouse on a ski vacation, it feels harsh to say, "Nevertheless, despite your protests, you are going to come with us." But that's what you must say. Why? Because having fun together is one of the foundations of authoritative parenting in the modern world. Because if most of the good times come when kids are not having fun with other kids, then it's no wonder that kids don't want to spend more time with adults. Because your kids won't value time with you above time with same-age peers if they rarely spend any time with you doing fun stuff. That's part of what it means to exercise parental authority. I just mentioned Dr. Newfield, a Canadian psychologist who recently retired from active practice after 40 years of working with children and adolescents. Over the past 4 decades, he observed firsthand a fundamental change in the ways in which kids across North America form and prioritize attachments. 40 years ago, kids' primary attachment was to their parents. Today, for most kids in the United States and Canada, kids' primary attachment is to other kids. For the first time in history, Newfield observes, young people are turning for instruction, modeling, and guidance, not to their mothers, fathers, teachers, and other responsible adults, but to people whom nature never intended to place in a parenting role, their own peers. Children are being brought up by immature persons who cannot possibly guide them to maturity. They're being brought up by each other. Today, most North American kids care more about the good regard of their peers than they care about the good regard of their parents. And that's another excerpt of The Collapse of Parenting. Where do we stand? Well, the Supreme Court refused to hear Texas' lawsuit against 4 states, saying that Texas has no standing to sue other states. I'm going to say this again that I talked about a couple of episodes ago, where there's a lot of people talking about why this is happening, and they don't understand. I heard a clip from Mark Levine this morning where he's going on and on about how that he's convinced there's some sort of corruption, or most people on the right are saying there's some form of cowardice that is preventing the Supreme Court from coming to the right conclusion. And some people are even going so far as to say that this is proof that there should be some sort of secession. We'll have a Republican states of America and a lefty states of America, and we'll go that direction. But it's not necessary, and they're all wrong about what the Supreme Court, the reason that the Supreme Court makes this mistake and made that mistake and makes others of the similar nature. The Supreme Court has come out and said that the way they approach any case is to make the presumption for the status quo. Unfortunately, they don't understand what the status quo is, and that's how they go wrong. They need to understand that, especially from their perspective, the status quo, when it comes to law in this country, is the Constitution. That means every law should be presumed to be unconstitutional until proven otherwise. What is a law? When the Congress creates a law, what are they doing? They're creating change. And it is up to the Congress to prove that that change is absolutely necessary. And if they fail to do so, then they are subject to having that law struck down or overturned. So again, if the Supreme Court would simply make the presumption for the right status quo, yes, if you're challenging a particular law in front of the Supreme Court, technically the law is a status quo. After all, it was passed legitimately by the U.S. House of Representatives, Senate, etc., but you're missing the ultimate status quo with that kind of an approach. And that the ultimate status quo is the Constitution. If you don't make the presumption for the Constitution, then what happens is you put any plaintiff in the position of having to prove a negative, and that's impossible. The plaintiff now has to come to the court and prove that the statute in question, the issue in question, is not constitutional, proving a negative, and that is impossible. The burden must be on the people that have created change. For instance, with this Texas lawsuit, what has happened is some of the states, Pennsylvania in particular, changed their voting laws, changed their procedures for how it is that you can vote and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And the issue was, how did they do that? Did they do that legally? Okay, in accordance with the Constitution of the United States and their own Constitution, or illegally? And it should be, the burden must be on the state of Pennsylvania to prove that it was done legally and in concert with their Constitution. And that's what the Supreme Court should have done. They should have heard the arguments, demand that that Pennsylvania produce said proof, and if failing to do so, then they would the Supreme Court would consider whatever remedy is whatever remedy that Texas is asking for. In this particular case, remand it back to the states to redo the count, or to refer it perhaps to the legislature, the state legislature, for proceedings. So again, sum up that it is, if the Supreme Court makes the presumption for the Constitution, they will do things correctly. They will put the burden of proof where it belongs, on somebody that can prove a positive, instead of putting the burden of proof on somebody, asking them to prove a negative, which is impossible. So be of good cheer, because Republicans have a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court, 213 South seats in the House of Representatives, 50-48 in the Senate, with 2 races outstanding. Republicans have 27 governorships to the Democrats' 23. Republicans control 55 of 99 state legislative chambers. So we don't have to. The people are telling you that if Donald Trump is not reelected, then it's some kind of a disaster and it's horrible. And if we have, and if the Senate races don't go our way, that's horrible and awful, and our country is going to go right down the toilet. They're lying to you. The fact of the matter is, we have a lot of, to quote, I think it was Nancy Pelosi, we have a lot of arrows in our quiver. Lots and lots. Okay, So what it is that the United States Senate does can be undone by a lawsuit from any one of these states in which the Republicans have the governorship and a majority. Remember that during the Texas lawsuit, 16 other states joined in that lawsuit. They agreed with Texas that this was an issue that needed to be scrutinized and a problem that needed to be fixed or resolved. Voters in 4 more states made the clearly wrong choice and legalized the recreational use of marijuana. And I suspect that they did it for the same reason California did, is a sense of inevitability. It's inevitable, we may as well go ahead and vote for it. And that's the way the left works. They don't convince you of anything. They don't provide facts and figures for why it is better for society at large to have marijuana legalized. Also, frequently, the states like California contradict themselves, which the left does all the time. This is why they always fail, ultimately, in that, in this particular case, they're anti-tobacco. They have stated, the governor and the legislature have stated their goal is to create a smoke-free society and to do so by a certain time. Well, what about marijuana? The main way that you ingest marijuana is by smoking it. Now, to the state's credit, there are anti-smoking marijuana ads. Part of it is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. We're starting to hear if you are smoking marijuana and you're getting high, don't get behind the wheel. If you get high, you'll get a DUI. That's the new little rhymey thing that the left is doing. But they're contradicting themselves. On the one hand, if you want this to be a smoke-free society, then good, you should push to have de-emphasize tobacco at the very least. But on the other, you cannot then emphasize and champion and cheer and celebrate the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana. It's contradictory. The same thing with when you look at health care. They want to have single-payer health care. Well, what is it that's going to happen eventually to some of the marijuana smokers? They're going to get lung cancer. So now we have more people getting lung cancer that didn't have to get lung cancer. Who's going to pay for that treatment? That's right, the taxpayer. And this is all because the government went ahead and championed the smoking of marijuana. Stupid. There's another ballot measure that the government is trying to put on the ballot that is about decriminalizing magic mushrooms, heroin, and cocaine. But yet, they want single-payer health care. So how do you square those two? You can't. So again, they contradict themselves, and they ultimately end up destroying themselves because of those constant contradictions, and they contradict themselves because they refuse to acknowledge reality. Let's see. Back in a minute. Thank you. Be of good cheer. The universe is benevolent and success is to be expected. Therefore, the left has no authority, no power, and they cannot win. Think about it. On the next episode, we've all been brainwashed. And that concludes another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and always ask yourself, what is real? How do I know? And what should I do about it? I'm Ron, and that's The Drill.